Hi, I'm Gwen, and this is the history of tennis rackets. So first off, tennis got really popular when King Henry VIII started playing them. Yes, the big chud loved tennis. The big chud. At first, it was called royal tennis, and they usually played indoors, and it was around France because of King Henry VIII. It was indoors with walls surrounded it, kind of like the indoor tennis courts today. And then all of a sudden, in 1874, lawn tennis became a thing. And that's when they started to use ash wood for the handle of it, but they used gut lining for the middle of it at some point too. And then they had a leather grip at the bottom. So lots of animal use. And then starting in 1947, they started using laminated wood so it could be a little bit more flexible. Now like Wilson and Dunlap started getting their recognition. The Dunlap and the Wilson were two of the most popular tennis rackets around that time, around the 1950s. Metal rackets were also a thing around, but no one really wanted to use those. They weren't really as flexible, and why do you want to hold metal in your hand hitting balls? And they were very heavy. And in 1957, Rene Lacoste had the first steel racket, which was pretty, like a little more lightweight, so easier to like hit around, and had a thin beam around there. So it was a little easier, a little lighter. It made it more powerful for tennis players than wood because it was metal instead of wood. In the 1960s, Wilson bought the rights to her metal racket, and two of the biggest tennis players around that time were using them nonstop. Billie Jean King as well as Jimmy Connors. They won a bunch of titles with the metal racket, but then pretty quickly turned right back to the wooden racket in the 1970s. The 1980s, the wooden rackets were still used until 1983 when two men won French Open titles with the wooden rackets, and that was the last one. That was the last time they used the wooden ones. And after metal, it was all that in a bag of chips. And slowly they developed a lighter, more movable metal racket that had thinner circles around it. It was thinner and it was lighter to hold and hit. And then in the 1970s, 1980s, Dunlap started using graphite in their rackets, and it improved the stability and responsiveness with the ball. And that first one ever was the Dunlap 200G. And that started everything for everyone. Steffi Graf used that racket, and she won the Golden Grand Slam with it in 1988. So it was pretty cool development of the tennis racket. And then since then, the use of graphite has changed very little, so it's been basically graphite ever since the new movement and her winning the 1988 game. And then in 2003, Andy Roddick used his Bubblette Pure Drive racket for the US opening, and nothing's really changed since then. That's been the most popular one since 2003. It's been about 23 years since then, so not too much big of a change since then, but we'll see what happens. And since then, the only really thing that has changed is the weight and the size of rackets. Just slight little changes to each racket as from 20 years ago, and the ability to customize them to each person. So for the graphite ones, they're made by using cut strands of graphite and then sheets of it to mold around it. And they use a spinning drum to have that ability to be molded. And then the sheets are cut into different lengths for the different parts of the tennis racket. And then an additional sheet, like more sheets of the graphite, can hold it to make heavier duty rackets. And then they use pressurized air and mold it, put it through a mold and heat it up so it stays like thicker in the same shape. Then sanded, and the material is ground down so it's nice and smooth for the player. And the core and the inside of the tennis racket is filled with foam, which I never knew that. It's filled with foam, so it has that little bouncy, and it's not just like empty air. And then the holes are put in to the sides of it, and it is ready, and then it gets layers and layers of paint on top of it. And then it is ready. Quality checks are done, and then the grip is put on the bottom. That's the last part. Can't do that. Grommets and handle pallets are put on first, and then the grip is on last. And then some of them are strung with the factory strings, or some of them you can buy without the strings in, and you can get them with the strings that you want on them. And then it is shipped to tennis suppliers all across the world. Ready to be used by anyone. I personally have a Wilson. It's yellow and black. It's beautiful. I have yet to make the ball popping noise on it yet, even though I was in tennis all 4 years of high school. But we will see. Now I just play recreationally, and that is how you build a tennis racket and the history of it. And I believe it is a great tool, and tennis is one of my favorite sports. Thanks.